Thank you very much to invite me to present the results of our research. And I'm glad, yes, to be here and to try to give a point of view about the discussion. I think that the panel before was very interesting and the questions were very interesting. So I think that, yes, we will discuss more and more. I'm sorry for my English. I'm Italian, so yes, you can recognize by my accent, but yes, I hope it's better that I speak English than Italian because you don't know Italian. So start. I work in the Italian Observatory about blockchain in Politecnico of Milan, is the big university, technical university in Italy, and we try to develop the blockchain market in Italy, like to make research about worldwide happening in blockchain market to give the Italian companies the opportunity to know these technologies and to develop the opportunities also in Italian market. So we did a lot of research about definition, and we compare a lot of platforms to understand better how the companies can develop blockchain project. After that, we analyze also the governance of project, not of the protocol, but about the project. So today I will explain the result of our research. Yes, first of all, I would like to give you some definition. I know that everyone here knows very well the blockchain technologies, but I think that is important that I try to give some point, some pillars, and after that you will understand better what I will do about the governance. So yes, we speak about blockchain, but it is necessary to speak about distributed ledger technologies. Is based of blockchain, but blockchain add other feature about distributed ledger. So distributed ledger are systems that allow the nodes of a network to achieve consensus on a modification of a distributed ledger in a trustless way and without a trusted and central entity. So this is a very important point. And the blockchain is belongs to the distributed ledger, but it adds a lot of features and new characteristics that in the distributed ledger we don't find. So I think that these are more technical definitions. I think that we are speaking about a new paradigm. The new paradigm is the Internet of Value, is a new system of transaction and value. Value is not only money, is every kind of asset that we can share with the Internet. Right now, we need to have a kind of central entity. But in the future, in the Internet of Value, we can transfer value without a central entity. This is the objective, the mission of all this kind of discussion. We are the beginning of the new paradigm. Maybe we will see the new future in a few days, in few years. So we identify a kind of 5 pillars of the Internet of Value. We have a network that is decentralized and disintermediated. We have a lot of algorithms. The protocol is the problem. One point that we can find here is the incentives and the governance that are protocols governance. I think that is a very important point to compare different platforms. We have a lot of platforms of Internet of Value, and they have different incentives and different governance. After that, in the Internet of Value, we have a ledger, okay, it's a distributed ledger, and this ledger is transparent, and the structure of the ledger is really important. After that, we have transfer and asset. That are the pillars of the Internet of Value. Yes, we try to compare all the most important platform, and in the platform we compare the governance, and as you can see, we have the most important public and permissionless platform. They have a governance by community, not by a companies, not by a consortium, not by a foundation. It's the community that is the governance of this kind of platform. Yes, after that, we identify also the features of Internet of Value. So we have disintermediation, we have decentralization, we have a ledger that is characterized by immutability and transparency. The transfers are traceable, programmability, and digitalization. That are the features of all the projects that we analyzed. So after that, we try to understand how the projects, the companies that are starting to work with the blockchain, they can do with the blockchain. So we identify 5 types of usage of blockchain from companies, and we divide in 2 bigger clusters. First one, we have the creation of new platform. So in the creation of new platform, we have, yes, a governance of the projects and a governance of the platform. Instead, we have also the usage of blockchain for a kind of solution on existing platform. And we have a lot of companies worldwide that are starting to use blockchain in that way. Like we have a notarization, like using a kind of timestamping of data on immutable ledger of a public platform. After that, we have on-top solutions on blockchain. Here we can find a lot of type of projects, like projects on smart contracts, or projects like a decentralized app, and so on. Okay, so in this case, we have a platform, and we have a company that create a project on this kind of platform. The company doesn't work on the platform, okay? They create a solution on the platform. After that, we have cryptocurrency, that is the most important application. So, yes, we analyzed this kind of projects worldwide. And yes, we tried to connect this kind of projects with the features of the Internet of Value. And we analyzed that some project like the project of notarization, they work on the immutability and the sharing information, but they don't work about tokens or other characteristic, other feature of blockchain. Instead, we have on the other side, the Internet of Value is when you can use all the features of blockchain. Yes, if you ask me, yeah, if we found more notarization or more Internet of Value, as you know, we found a lot of notarization or distributed ledger. Instead, we found few projects developed by companies that are more Internet of Value, okay? We found a lot of platforms that are Internet of Value, but we didn't find companies that developed solutions that are Internet of Value. So this is the type of usage. And we analyzed the most advanced project to identify also the difficulty of implementation. We find a lot of notarization. We identify also the distributed ledger project and cryptocurrency. After that, the on-top solution and the Internet of Value. Look at the Internet of Value solution that are more peer-to-peer solution that, yes, where you have a real P2P network, peer-to-peer network. So now I arrive to the governance. Okay, to analyze the governance, we divide the process of governance in two parts. Okay, we simplify them, okay, because we have maybe we have more and more parts of the governance, but we simplify in two parts, that is the access and the rules, the protocol, the algorithm behind the platform. Yes, in the access is the governance is who can get access to the solutions in the foundation, in the consortium, if there is some centralized players that decide who go in the solution, is a centralized governance, okay? After that, we have maybe if they have also a centralized rules, defining rules, we have a centralized governance, totally. We have a hybrid solution if maybe we have a centralized access, but when you go in the project, everyone can change the rules in the same way. Okay, so we have a kind of a hybrid governance that is connected to a different type of solution. Instead, the real distributed governance is when we have a real distributed access and real distributed rules. And I think that we didn't find a lot of solutions that are real distributed governance for the project, not for the platform, for the project. Okay, so. Yes, we identify this kind of governance, and we try to connect to the usage of blockchain. So we, yes, as you know, notarization is a centralized governance because, yes, there is a company that decide to use a platform for the timestamp of data. Okay, so yes, here we have an example. It's an Italian banks. They used notarization on Bitcoin platform for timestamping of data, financial data that were important for them. Sorry, from Ethereum. After that, we can see that on-top solutions. In on-top solution, we found a lot of solutions. We have a centralized one, we have a hybrid governance, but also maybe there will be also a distributed governance. Yes, yeah, we analyze some project and we try to classify them in the different solution. After that, the distributed ledger. Distributed ledger is a system where you have a new platform, okay, a new platform, but usually with an access that is restricted. Someone can decide who can go in the platform. The example are TradeLens or WeTrade, okay, in a different way, because instead of TradeLens, we have a more centralized solution. WeTrade, we think that they are a little less centralized, but is centralized in a hybrid way. It's not a distributed governance, okay? Instead, for the Internet of Value, maybe we will have a distributed governance. Right now, we didn't find a real concrete project that is already distributed governance. I think that it is possible, but right now we didn't find a complete solution. Maybe also in the solution that we saw before, maybe in the future we will arrive in a distributed governance. Right now, is a more or a centralized or a hybrid governance. So Yes, we analyze for these kind of considerations. We analyzed a lot of use case worldwide. We analyzed more than 500 solutions worldwide. We analyzed not only projects but also announcements that are an important part of the solutions. And yes, I'm sorry for the slides, but. Yes, in the future, we are want to link this kind of 500 solution to the governance to understand and also the development of governance of a project, because we know that maybe some projects start in a centralized way and after that maybe they can go in the distributed governance. Yes, we try to map it also, not only the project, but also the project in different sectors for different process and the future step. And I hope that we will speak about that in the future. We want to try to map this kind of use case also for different governance in the future. I will speak about that. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, I'm here for questions or considerations. I think that we have a lot of consideration about this topic, so I hope that we can discuss. There is also Giacomo Bella, that is a researcher with me, and yes, if you have a questions or everything.
Yes, thank you for a great talk and a great research. You mentioned you didn't really find a decentralized governance model. I work with Lightning Network as a protocol. I have seen at least 7 implementation of that protocol, and there's an open, transparent community developing on the protocol characteristics, and other communities build the software. If that's not decentralized governance, what is?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't explain very well. Like, I didn't find decentralized governance developed by companies in a different way. Yes, Lightning Network is more of a platform in my consideration, like is a new platform, new solutions that can be created, and companies that they can use Lightning Network for their solution. Okay, so the project, when I see different projects that they work on Lightning Network in the future, maybe in a decentralized governance, I think that we will classify in a decentralized governance. Right now, yes, we see a very decentralized, distributed platform, okay, and in the future, the usage, the application of usage from companies, maybe it will be in a distributed governance. I don't know if I explained it very well. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mariana Bellotti and I work in France, ex-alumna of Politecnico de Milano, so really happy to see you. Actually, after my studies, I worked 1 year about the definition in the blockchain environment. So I really encountered a lot of difficulties in separating the disintermediation and decentralization. Actually, when everyone asks a question about do you have examples that are really decentralized, for me, the right question is, do you have examples that are really disintermediate? More than that. So actually, the question is about, is it clear that disintermediation is a necessary condition for me to have distributed governance? Is it also sufficient?
I think, yes, good question. I think that it is necessary, but not sufficient. Like, yes, we need also to identify the evolution of the project. Like, for example, before we spoke about the starting of a new project, the starting of everything, and maybe in the starting part, it is necessary to intermediate, to create a kind of central point of view. In the evolution, maybe if we want to make modifications of protocols, maybe it is necessary to change something, because something, we are creating platform, we are creating projects that are not, they living only 1 year. They will live for years and years, and something in the ecosystem will change. So this kind of characteristics, maybe they can change, and in the future maybe it is necessary to make a modification of protocol in a different way. So the disintermediation is necessary, okay, but is not the only solution to create a distributed governance. It is necessary to create disintermediation, but also a disintermediation with the future modification of protocols and so on.
Other questions? Yes, please. Yep.
Hi, my name is Koen Vingeroet. I work for Belfius Bank in Insurance. I know that most questions are a statement, so I will make my statement too. And I would like to start with Peter Drucker. He makes a difference between management and leadership, where management is doing things right and leadership doing the right things. You make a nice split between the platforms and the projects building on top of those platforms. And for the platforms, which are usually technical implementation, I think that the community is a good idea to do things right? But for the project built on top, you need a vision, you need a business model, you need a business case, you need alignment of several stakeholders into one direction. Then I think a centralized entity is simply required to do things right. And, well, that's my statement.
Thank you.
One thing about that, we tried to separate the governance of the project, the business project, from the governance of the platform. Also because we are seeing a lot of platforms that are being created by communities also for different business projects that are not, I don't know, maybe are some is a financial use case, other are insurance, but also traceability. And so there is this, they want to create a platform that could be use case agnostic in some kind of way. And so we think that also the private or permission platform that could become permissionless can have a distributed governance and could be a different thing from the governance of the business case on that platform. So maybe it's we will see also platform that like Alastria, as I understood, they are for different business case, and then the governance of the business case is something maybe smaller on looking at the governance of the platform.
Yeah, this is another statement. No, but in any case, you already, because I was going to make the question whether you analyze platforms like Lightning Network or even Elastic, but you already answered. Here, I can see only business cases, okay, applications, and then the platform is a different thing. And the same thing, just to let you know, that happens in Elastic. We are governing just the platform in as much decentralized way as possible, but then the use cases, the members can implement whatever model they want. They can implement models where they do this in a decentralized way, or centralized, or collaboration. For me, decentralization is not important. The important thing is the people. the persons, blockchain or not. So sometimes decentralization or disintermediation is not the right thing, okay? And I have many use cases. So the important thing that blockchain brings is collaboration and so on. So I really like this, but in reality, I think that the focus should be on what of these things are or what value are bringing really to the citizens, because this is the important thing. Otherwise, we are not doing the right thing.
Arnaud IBM. Kind of following up that train of thought, I've been wondering, I mean, the whole presentation and a lot of the discussion that has happened to this point seems to assume that the goal, the ultimate goal is this distributed governance, which I'm not completely sure is accurate. I mean, I'm an open source specialist. References have been made to open source before, and what I actually talk often about is open governance, which I think is important, but does not necessarily imply distributed governance. So I would like to have your opinion on how you see this.
Okay. Yes, I think that the governance is a very important point for the success of a project. It's not the goal, okay, because we have to mix a lot of characteristics of a project. The governance is a good point for starting to understand and project, to plan the governance is a really important point for the success of a project. I think that is really important.
One thing. We presented the distributed governance like the arrival point of that, because what we see in a lot of use cases is that they are we are talking about governance of projects, and that are very centralized. And in this project, blockchain and distributed ledger are not useful because of companies are thinking about controlling everything. And so maybe just one company want to control everything. And so the governance is very related to the usefulness of blockchain and distributed ledger. So in this way, we can say we will never arrive to distributed governance. And maybe it is not useful to arrive at distributed governance, but we have to keep in mind that blockchain is distributed and decentralized by nature. So we should keep that in mind when we think about also business case.
There are some projects that they works very well without a centralized governance. We don't say that everyone that can arrive to the distributed governance. Someone they works very well in a centralized way, okay, in a centralized governance. But someone they will work better in a distributed governance, okay, instead of a centralized one. So it depends in kind of project. We identify project that we think that they find the right governance for them, okay? We didn't identify in the example project that are in the middle of developing, okay? But we identify that one that they decided already the governance in a good way.
Søren Giegler here from the Commission. I had a question concerning the different use cases, public versus private. So you have very different objectives of different projects. And then the follow-up question is, what is the actual impact on your citizens or users you want to get? It seems to me that you have focused a lot on the internal governance of the projects, but not so much on the question of accountability and the actual impact of the project on your citizens or on the users. Is that correct?
Yes, we will do an analysis on the impact in the future. We don't have right now analysis on the impact of all the projects. Yes, so we analyzed some of them, and we analyzed that they have a good impact on companies or on citizens, on the community, a good even if they have a centralized governance. So for that is not the impact is not connected only to the governance. It's connected more on the mission of the project instead of the governance. We saw that they are in the middle. Some projects are in the middle of their path, and so at the beginning, in the early stage, they decided governance easier, like a centralized one, and so they have a few positive impact, and they can have a more impact in the future with maybe are more hybrid or decentralized distributed governance. So yes, we divided different projects in terms of their stage and their path, if they are at the beginning of if they are a mature project. And for the first question about private and public, yes, is a good point. Yes, we didn't connect it. We didn't connect directly the private or public with the governance, even if there is a good connection, an important connection. We didn't connect because it depends the usage of the project, the business companies, the enterprise, how they are developing this kind of project. They can use distributed governance even if they use a private platform, okay? It depends on the project that they are developing in the future, okay? So I think that is, yes, we analyze it if it's private or public, but it's not only the feature that can create a different governance.
Thank you very much. Let's take maybe one last question.
One last question then. You've studied a few hundred projects. Do you see that the technical partner is included in the governance or not? And is there an impact on the result?
It depends which kind of projects are there. For example, if they are more distributed ledger or Internet of Value, so when they create a new platform, we look also at the governance of technical part, okay? Instead, if we look at the notarization on top solutions, we didn't analyze the governance of the platform because it's not part of the project, okay? If I use Bitcoin for notarization, okay, is not, I don't have a governance on Bitcoin. I have a governance of the project. So for this reason, yes, the clusterization, this of part creation of a new platform, it is necessary to have governance also the technical part. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Valeria, for this presentation, and thank you again for your questions. Please, a round of applause for Valeria. So, dear participants, we are about to dive into the dark side of the blockchains. I'm just kidding. We are very lucky today to have Clément Lesaege, the CTO of Kleros, who is about to present us with the project and the work done at Kleros in terms of governance of a solution that is by design very decentralized. So please welcome Clément on stage.
Thank you. So today we're going to speak about Kleros and see how it's a good example of how to use economic and game theory to make decentralized systems. So let's start with a basic problem. You have Alice who wants to pay Bob to make a website. But if you just Oh, this one? No,
No,
both of them are
just
working.
watch this way.
Test, test,
that way for the recording.
test, test. Like that? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Le son passe pas dans l'enregistrement.
Centralization is good.
Test, test, test. Okay, let's continue like that. Oh, okay. I just realized that I can see it's there. I'm not used to this kind of technology. So let's start with a simple example where you have Alice wants to pay Bob to perform a task, for example, making a website. If you just use a classical payment with Bitcoin or Ethereum, payments are irreversible, and if Bob does not do the job, there is no way for Alice to get back the money. So you can do something slightly more complex, which is to use a smart contract. In this case, Alice will deposit the money in an escrow smart contract. If the job is done correctly, Alice can sign a message and Bob can be paid from this smart contract. So at some point, the money is neither, it does not belong to Bob, does not belong to Alice, and does not belong to an intermediary. It basically belongs to some small piece of code which gives a rule on whether Alice should be reimbursed or Bob should be paid. Now, if you have a dispute between Alice and Bob, where Bob claims to have made the website, Alice claims that he hasn't, now you need to solve it. So they both can pay some arbitration fee, and that's gonna call a dispute resolution system, which can give a ruling, for example, in this case, rule for Alice, and then Alice gets reimbursed from the smart contract. That was a simple example of dispute resolution, but we have basically three large categories of disputes which can arise in the blockchain world. The first one was escrow system. The second one is Oracle disputes, and the last one will be list creation disputes. So now Oracle disputes. You have some smart contract, which are insurance smart contract, to pay some farmer an insurance in case of bad weather condition. So if weather conditions are good, the crop is good, they have some revenue from their crop, but now if the weather is bad, the crop won't grow, but they can be paid an insurance from this contract to still guarantee some revenue for the year. But now you have a problem, which is how do you know the weather condition on chain? So you can make an Oracle contract where you can let multiple parties give report on the weather condition. If the report match, that's easy. So here, both of them saying that it was raining. So the other contract are gonna pull data from the Oracle, and because it was raining, the crop are not damaged, and so no insurance is paid. But now, if you have conflicting reports, again, you need a dispute resolution system to determine what values Oracle will return, and then to determine how those contracts are gonna be resolved. So I give some example of contract about weather. It could be about earthquake. It could be about any kind of event which can be known by observer, but that is not known on chain. And here, here, the dispute resolution system rule that it was raining and the same thing happened. Now, last large category of disputes which can arise are disputes about list creation. So here, you want to make this funny use case where you want to make a list of picture of Doge, some meme. So you ask Alice and all the people who want to submit picture to put a deposit to submit a picture. And if no one complains, the picture is accepted, the item is accepted, and now you have another entry in the list. But now, if you try to submit something which should not belong to this list, anyone can challenge, and it goes to a dispute resolution system which can determine whether this entry was acceptable or not. So here we show that with meme because we actually done it. But more serious application are if you use some online platform where you want to list item. How do you prevent malicious item? How do you prevent people from listing weapons? How do you prevent people from listing illegal sexual material? You need some way to curate this content, and that can be done by list creation dispute, where you can remove item which should not belong to the platform. And this is a job which was traditionally done by moderator, but now if you are decentralized, you don't have any moderator anymore, so you need an economic incentive to curate the content. So here is a fun experiment we made. with a Dodge picture, and you see all the picture which got accepted, and people who try to put picture which were not picture of Dodges which got challenged, and the distribution system remove all those pictures, and people who posted this kind of picture lost some money. So now let's go into the dispute resolution system. So it can be simply a centralized arbitrator, but it's a model which have all the default of centralized systems, that you have some single point of failure, which can be malicious or hacked. You can use a multi-signature, which is slightly more advanced, where you ask, for example, 5 different actors to vote, and you take the majority, and that's how you solve dispute. Or you can use more complex system like a DAO, and that's what we built at Kleros. So if you want to use a dispute resolution DAO, the basic idea is to draw juror randomly. So you cannot have everyone all the time, because otherwise the dispute resolution will be too costly, or people would not paid enough so that it's worth solving disputes. So you only have to draw a subset of people to be what we call juror on this case, and give ruling to solve disputes. Now you have another problem which can arise, which is a civil attack. On the blockchain, you have no way to know if one account is one person or if one person made multiple accounts. So if you just let anyone to register in the system, you can have someone, this guy, attacking and registering thousands of times and overtaking the system. So we cannot just draw people randomly. We have to draw tokens, because tokens are Sybil resistant. So people who want to solve disputes and get paid, get arbitration fees, will have to deposit tokens, and some tokens are drawn, and if it's one of your tokens who is drawn, you are a juror in this case. So now with that, we solve the Sybil attack problem. Now there is another problem, which is economic incentive. How are you incentivized to give correct ruling? Because otherwise, if you're paid, you could just vote randomly, or even put a bot all the way voting no to all the questions and get paid. So to avoid this issue, we use some shading coin mechanism. The basic idea of the shading coin mechanism is that if you tend to vote in a manner coherent with the other participant, you tend to be rewarded across time, while if you tend to vote incoherently, you tend to be penalized across time. So here, in this case, all the jurors on the top voted to reimburse Alice, the jurors on the bottom voted to pay Bob, and so jurors on the bottom are slightly penalized by losing some token, and the jurors on the top are rewarded by winning token and arbitration fees. So this is what is known a shading coin mechanism, which is inspired by the concept of shading point by Thomas Schelling. So to get you a simple example of what would be a shading point, now imagine you are in Paris. You need to meet someone in Paris, but you don't know where, and you don't know at which time. Where should you go to have the highest chance of meeting the other participant, knowing he has been given the same information? Anyone have some idea where and when you will go? Okay, we got at the Eiffel Tower, and which time? Yeah, so noon at the Eiffel Tower. All place of Paris will work, all time will work, you will be able to meet if the other choose the same, but you have this shading point, which is noon in front of the Eiffel Tower, which stands out compared to other answers. So here, for the juror, the shading point is to give the honest ruling, because if any kind of ruling will work in terms of incentive, if the other participant shows this ruling, this is a ruling which is where people are going to converge toward because it stands out compared to dishonest rulings. So with Alice, so you have participants, they think that the other are going to vote for Alice because that's the honest ruling. So they are all going to vote for Alice because that's what they saw that the other would think. In practice, people tend to make this kind of reasoning up to 3 levels. They tend to choose what other people would, they tend to choose what they think other people will think, other people will think, other people will think. Now we can have some slightly more complex cases where now you can have some people who can give bribes. Bribing is even more problematic on-chain than it is in the outside world. Because you can bribe people without having to meet them, and you can bribe people trustlessly. You can make a smart contract which guarantees that if you perform this action on chain, you're gonna be paid a bribe. So in the outside world, if someone tries to bribe you, you have to trust that he's going to pay the bribe. He's a briber, so it's probably not someone trustworthy. So you may not accept easily. But no, you can get in the blockchain, you can guarantee to be paid the bribe you are promised. So to solve this problem, there is some appeal mechanism where you can put some additional deposit and get more juror and more jurors. But you're gonna say, okay, that solves the problem, not really, because what happens if the majority of the jurors are dishonest? And that's what we call the 51% attack, which is basically the same problem for proof of stake and proof of work system. In proof of work, you look at computational power. In proof of stake, you look at amount of coins. And if you have the majority of people holding computational power or coin who are behaving in a malicious way, the system will stop functioning. However, what you can do in case of 51% attack is you can fork the system. You can create a copy of the system where you only keep the token of the people who are honest. Then that's for actor to decide whether they want to use the old one or the new one. But in the case of an attack, even if a system has not the majority, people will tend to use the new one because that's a not corrupted system. And with this kind of attack, once you manage to do this attack, your coin are going to be worthless because people are going to stop using the system that you attacked and you destroyed. So you can destroy the system, but only if you get to have the majority of it. So you destroy your own asset by doing so. Going back to the incentive and the game theory, I previously gave you just a +1 and -1. That was an oversimplification. In practice, it's slightly more complex because if you want to give ruling, you have to look at evidence. So it has a cognitive cost. You need to spend time on it. While if you were to vote randomly, you don't have this cognitive cost. So you can see that in this game theory matrix, you have basically 3 possible outcomes which are stable, what we call Nash Equilibrium. So we are in a Nash Equilibrium where no participant would have an incentive to change unilaterally its behavior if the other participants are having the same behavior. So if everyone is voting honestly, no one has the incentive to change his behavior because they're going to vote for something else and going to be penalized for not voting the same way as the majority. If everyone is voting dishonestly, that's also the same because you don't have an incentive to go voting honestly because the majority is voting dishonestly, and so you will be penalized for voting honestly. And lastly, you have voting randomly, which is also an equilibrium, because if everyone votes randomly, whatever you vote, you will have a random outcome because the other participants are equally likely to vote yes and no. And in this case, it's better not to spend time looking at evidence to save from cognitive cost. So you have 3 equilibrium which can arise, and only one is a good equilibrium, which can lead to people ruling correctly. So that's important to be sure that the system is in an initial way where people are giving coherent ruling, and that's obviously what we started. That's obviously the importance of also culture around the project to start in a way where initial participants have incentive and wants the system to work honestly. Now let's go on token model. I think most of the projects you see on chain who are putting some token are just putting the token as a way of fundraising, and that token should not be there in the project in the first place. There is, however, I think a few token model which make sense, and token used for governance will be one of them. So to determine if a token is useful or if it's just some additional element which was put for fundraising, we need to look what would the system would be if you use the native token of the blockchain instead of a specific one. So we're going to do this comparison, and we're going to look what would happen if instead of using a specific token, we would have used ETH. So if we would have used ETH and you want to do a 51% attack, so get the majority of the token in the system, you could buy a lot of ETH and without really impacting the price because most of the ETH are not used for Kleros. But now, if you want to 51% attack Kleros using a specific token, a PNK, you will make the price increase a lot because of the market depth. The first one, you're gonna be able to buy it at market price, but now try to buy 50% of it. You're gonna pay more and more and more because you're gonna run into the problem of not a sufficient amount of token being sold at market price. Now, what will happen if you manage to 15% attack and you manage to destroy the system? If you had this with ETH, you still have ETH, which are valuable because they have used in plenty of other use cases in Kleros. So you haven't lost really that much by attacking the system. But now, if you use a specific token, you have destroyed the system, and so now you have some useless token and you lose some value that you put into buying those tokens. And lastly, on how to get out of some attack, if we are to use ETH, some attacker has control of the system, and there is not really anything we can do. But by using a specific token, you can fork the token. You can make a minority fork where you create a new token that you only give to people who were voting honestly in the previous system. And now you create a new system, and people can start using this new system instead of the old one because they know that the previous system has been corrupted and the new system is only made by honest participants. And hopefully, all of those should never happen. The simple fact that it could happen will prevent people from attempting those kind of 15% attacks. Another question is why not make a lot of application-specific DAO? Like you make a DAO for the website, you make a DAO to give the weather condition, you make a DAO to make the list of an e-commerce website. It's also about resistance to attacks. So if you had small DAO, 15% attack are easier, and it's also logistically easier to extract value from it because you only need to abuse the system in one particular use case. But now if you have a large system which is used for multiple use cases, the cost of attack, the budget of attacks are way higher. And if you really want your attack to be worthwhile, you getting more value than what you're gonna destroy in value of your token, you will need to exploit the system in all possible ways the system is used, which is logistically way harder. Now going back to general governance and not just dispute resolution, there is a question on how to update the system. Because the system works currently, but if you want to add new use cases, if you want to improve it, you need a way to update the system. So in two ways, in adding use cases, and in the second way, which is adding policies, which are guidelines on how jurors vote to resolve disputes. So currently, it's with token voting using Aragon application, where you can vote on a proposal for or against proposal. As you can see, the participation is still quite low because those proposals are not really important, and because for now you can only vote directly. In further updates to increase the possibility of participation, we will use liquid voting, where you can either vote directly or delegate your vote to another user, which can also in turn delegate his vote. So this way, you have both of the advantage of direct voting and of representative voting because you can switch from one to another. So you still keep your power, you still keep the power of your vote, but from a practical perspective, because you are not really concerned by most of the vote, you automatically get delegate for most of the votes. All of those economics and game theory are not just some design. So we effectively tried this with the Dodge on Trial, which was this cryptoeconomic experiment with a curated list of Dodge pictures. And we put incentive to people to try to attack it. And people tried to make bribe, people tried to make complex bribe, and bribing was not really effective. The only few issue we got was with some images not being challenged, with people not looking at the system at a particular point of time, but no ruling were made which could have been considered to be dishonest. This led us back to game theory and another attack that you can have on the system, which is often mentioned, but in practice have never really been conducted, which is what we call the P+Epsilon attack. So you want people to vote for Bob, even if Bob is not the one who should win the dispute. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna say, if you vote for Bob and Bob is not the winning result, I'm gonna pay you some extra value here, 2.01 extra value, which will compensate your loss from your penalty from being coherent. And if you vote for Bob and everyone votes for Bob, well, you are coherent and you got rewarded, so I should not give you anything. So why this kind of attack are quite dangerous and attract a lot of attention from people in game theory is because they have a high budget. So you need to be able to show you have enough money to pay them in case the attack fail. But they have a zero cost when it works. Because if it works, everyone votes for Bob, people get rewarded from voting for Bob, and you don't need to pay them anything. So that was one of the attack we test in our cryptocurrency experiments. And even if people did not take the bribe the majority of time, that's still the best attack we managed to have so far, where 1/3 of the people took bribe in this kind of attack. So it's still not 50%, but it's still quite concerning and something to be watched in terms of game theory. Now let's go to application on what's currently there on mainnet or on testnet. So on mainnet, you have this registry of tokens where people can submit tokens. So same incentive as I explained with the Dodge picture. You put a deposit to submit a token. If no one complains, it gets added to this list. And if someone complains, you have a dispute where juror can vote on whether this token information are correct or not. So we got more than 100, perhaps almost 200 now. Number are not updated of submissions. And in addition of having tokens, we also have badges. So a badge is you certify some information about this particular token. So we are working with some exchange, which is at Finex, to have a badge to certify that some token which want to get listed on this exchange satisfy some criteria. So we got 22 projects applying for this badge, like stating that they satisfy the criteria of the exchange, which led to 4 disputes where people challenge those badge and claim that the token did not satisfy those criteria. So if you want to see an idea of what kind of dispute we have here, we have some project which is Biochain, where they submitted their token because they want to be listed on this exchange. But some people found out that they lied about the credential of their CTO, who claimed to have been a senior researcher in Oxford and IBM, where it was completely false. So someone called people in Oxford, and they saw that this Scott Bingley did not belong there and have never worked there, and that was a basis to reject this badge because of dishonesty of the team involved in the project. So this is some kind of self-regulation where people put some money at stake when they want to get listed somewhere, and it's kind of almost a fine, because those projects, they lost their dispute, they lost the deposit, they lost perhaps something like 300 euro worth of deposit. That's some kind of equivalent of 3,000 euro of deposit of fine which were made to some project having dishonest practices. On other applications which are on the testnet, so you cannot really use them with real money now, you can use them to test. You have this escrow system I spoke first, where you can pay people and in case the service or good is not provided, ask for reimbursement. So you can make a transaction to buy llama socks, and if you don't get your llama socks, you can request for reimbursement. And if the other party does not accept, you get a dispute. Or you can exchange some cryptocurrency to another cryptocurrency when those currencies are not on the same chain. And the last huge category of dispute, which is Oracle dispute, when you want to get this information about the outside world. So people can ask questions, give answer, and answer can be challenged, and it's also lead to some disputes. So thanks everyone, and we're gonna go to the questions. Yes.
So Chiara Mazzone from the European Commission. The copyright directive has recently been approved, and now platforms and, for instance, YouTube and others are charged to remove content which is not copyrighted protected. Can you imagine a system with whom you would have sufficient incentives for the rights holder just to have content which is covered by copyright published, and for the others that do want to listen to non-copyrighted content or to share it, to still have on that platform? I don't know if my question is clear.
So you mean to remove automatically content which is copyrighted?
I mean, today the platforms which are very centralized has to approve or not. I mean, it is for copyright, but it can be legal content, it can be many other things.
So I think you can have like purely a model where you submit content with a deposit and people can challenge it. So in this case, if you submit a video which is copyrighted, you could have someone think, oh, this is a copyrighted video, I'm going to challenge it because I'm going to get the deposit of the one who submitted this video, which should not belong to this platform. So that's the same as I was pushed with the Dodge and the tokens. That's really the same economic incentives. Or you could have some model a bit hybrid where you could have some robots which will automatically flag some content from being potentially copyright violation and require a deposit only if the robot flagged it as being potentially violating copyright. Because one of the problem of those robots is that they have some false positive, and you have content which is legit, which would be acceptable because it's in like a caricature exception or quotation exception, which get flagged by this robot and remove. So in this case, you could have some kind of purpose saying, oh, I think your content is copyrighted, but if it's not really copyrighted, if you think you have the right to put it, put a deposit, and if no one challenges it, it's going to get there. But if someone challenges it and you lose your dispute, you're going to have your content.
But how would you solve the issue if it's satire or not? If it's just, I mean, who decides?
So in this case, it's a dispute.
Yeah, so it's people voting finally.
Yeah, so the platform could just copy the rule of given by European legislation, and the juror will say, okay, I think it's satire content, and even if the filter flagged it, the filter is wrong and it should not be prevented upload. So I could see a system like that, yeah. And that's one of the, that's not something implemented, but that's one of the use cases where we saw.
If I may answer to your question directly, maybe it's the other way around. This could work because currently we have take down on an assumption of copyright. So you register something and it will automatically take or block something that might be legal to upload. So if those people that register content would need to put stake with the registering of content, and they would lose a stake if their claim is is too large. It could be a solution against overclaiming. So the other way around.
Yeah. The other way around could also work, where you don't have deposit, but you have deposit to request removal of content, and that will be a way to avoid like some kind of copyright trolling where people try to remove content which is legit. Yeah, it's also a good way. It was not how I thought about it, but once you tell about it, that makes perfect sense to also have it this other way.
So, Lucas Reper, equally from the European Commission. As a lawyer, of course, I was utterly frightened to listen to your presentation, how algorithms are going to replace judges in the futures. So I would like to understand a little bit better how the underpinnings of this arbitration mechanism work. And because I also work on tokens, I would like to understand that. I picked up from your presentation that the decision between true or untrue is one that will be driven by the perception of the judges, what the majority will say. Does this concept of judging about being true or false have its constraints when it comes to more complex use cases? And what are the use cases where this concept can usefully really put to use without running into complexities? Just to come back to your insurance case, did it rain or didn't it rain is a very simple question, but an insurance contract may be predicated on 10 conditions. How strong did it rain? When exactly did it rain? And what was the damage caused on Earth by the rain? So to have a simple arbitration mechanism to say, yeah, it did rain or it did not rain, what are the use cases you can really replace the human judge with this algorithmic solution? Very interesting for me.
So with the e-train example, you could have multiple oracles, not only giving it rain or did not rain. You could have what was the quantity of the rain. You could have like temperature. You could have a lot of different oracle questions which are asked. And then you have this insurance contract, which can pull from multiple oracle and compute the estimated amount of damage covered by the policy. So you can split complex dispute into simple ones. Then on the question of a complex dispute, so Kleros, it's made to be a crowdsourced dispute resolution system. So it's efficient where crowdsourcing is useful, where you want a sufficient amount of people to go and fetch for information and solve medium to like easy to medium kind of cases. You obviously don't want to use this kind of system to have to settle a dispute between two international corporations where they give each 50 pages memo. That's not what the system is made for. It's made for crowdsourced arbitration of simple to medium difficulty use cases.
Wisdom of the crowd part of my question, do you think that this is a reliable instrument?
So on some way, voting the way you expect people to vote is some really, it's really interesting because it gives predictability. You know that people are going to vote or they think other people are going to vote. So if you think that other people think that something is allowed, the jurors are probably going to go on your side if you do it because you think that other people think it's allowed. So that's to avoid some kind of legal trickery where most of the population will think this is okay, but then there is some really small trick somewhere in some hidden law where it makes it not okay. I think the law cannot really be fair or unfair, but at least you can have something predictable. The interest is, you know that if you do this action, that's what is going to happen. So it gives you predictability, even if fairness is more about the rules than to the application of the law.
I had a follow-up question. It was one of my previous questions. So you mentioned that participants, I mean, you tend to be incentivized to vote with the others, but we know that humans are created for divergent thinking and not for convergent thinking, which is what IT and informatics does. So in a way, when you are confronted with more ethic problems, or even is this hate speech, is this racism, do we have to remove this content from Facebook or not? And that we know that we have ethical problems in training artificial intelligences that are going to remove this content. How do you deal with this dispute resolution mechanism? How do you take into consideration what ethics is, what values are in a certain context, and how can this be biased worldwide? Because in some way, everything is biased because values are the representation of a society.
Yeah, so I think blockchain system, you cannot just draw a parallel with a chain with a blockchain system, because in a blockchain system, you have some system which is opt-in, so you choose to use it or not, and it's forkable. So if someone goes to give you some racist slur on the street, you cannot prevent that, and you cannot fork the street to make a street which is free of racism. With this kind of blockchain system, if you think that the way this system is working goes against your values, you can fork it. That's really easy. That's one transaction to fork it, perhaps a few hours to copy some database. And you can now have a copy of the system, except that you added your rule that align with your ethics. So for now, there is only one Kleros, but I guess at some point, there may be some huge divergence in the community, which could lead to forking. And then application or individual users could choose the system they best align with. You could even imagine to have some kind of social media where you could determine what rule you want to be applied to what is displayed to you. So in the easy way that you can see, okay, I want to remove all content which is non-safe for work. That's already something which can happen in Google, where you have some kind of toggle where you can allow or not allow non-safe for work content. But you could also have this kind of system with content that you can find offensive, and you could decide that this you find offensive and you don't want it to be displayed to you, but this is fine. Like you may say, okay, like caricature of religious people, I'm fine with it, so you let it, but someone else with a different sensibility could choose to block his content from being displayed to him.
Just to add something, because we have been analyzing Kleros for some specific use cases, and I agree with Lucas that it would be very good to know or to have something like a clear statement of what use cases are appropriate for this or not. Because, for example, we were discussing with Federico, okay, who is the founder of Kleros, to implement this on the financial ombudsman. Okay, basically how to reduce litigation on disputes between citizens or customers and banks. Okay, and then we reached the conclusion that the system is incredibly powerful for many use cases, but still there is no formula. But not in this case, because the selling point in these disputes is the banks always lose. Point. Always. Doesn't matter what happened, okay? Why? Because of the nature of the asymmetry of the participants. But in any system where the participants are more or less symmetric and there is no, let's say, hate, okay, or specific strong bias, this system, we think this is incredibly powerful, and it doesn't have to have legal implications, okay?
If I may just add, so you're putting into place this arbitration mechanism. I have a car accident, and the algorithm tells me, yeah, it was your fault because there was this judging, and the judges decided, based on many factors, that this was your fault. What is my possibility to attack the decision of the Oracle? How can I challenge it?
So the disputes are not into international dispute resolution standards, so they are not applicable by a state. So you cannot go to a state and ask it to be enforced. It can be considered as a modality of the contract. So your contract, for example, for the website, will not just be you build me a website, but is you build me a website, and to be paid, it has to reach some level of quality determined by Kleros juror where a dispute will arise. So that's not an arbitration in the legal sense, that's just a modality of the contract. Now, what you can do, if you are able to identify the other party and the value is high enough, you can obviously go into a state court to try to have this ruling overturned. But then that means that you need to identify the party and you need to have the ruling of the state court enforced, which in some cases can be completely impossible. If you look at list curation, you probably won't know who have challenged your listing, and it's like having some crazy investigation to reverse engineer who was behind this address. So in most cases, or perhaps not most, but perhaps half of the cases, you won't know the other party, and so you won't have any legal recourse because you don't know who to sue.
So I agree with you. I think it will be infinitely difficult to go to a judge and just to explain them how all of this works. I mean, I would be completely overwhelmed as a judge. But so doesn't this put a certain ethical burden on you as a platform operator to verify that the people that actually participate in the voting process are well chosen? We had the example from the financial sector where we said, well, the Schelling point will always be that the banks lose. So doesn't this ring some alarm bells to say the system is perhaps vulnerable, that if we get the wrong voters into the system, there will be regularly wrong outcomes? And how do you account for that in the governance of your platform?
So we are not operating the system. We are a software company, we develop the system, but we can disappear and everything will still work. At least in theory. In practice, that will cause some issue about upgrade. So for now, I would say that the Kleros cooperative, the legal entity developing the Kleros protocol, is still required mostly for upgrades. But in a few years, when the system will be even more mature, we could completely disappear and the system should still be working. So we are not operating this system. Then on the selecting juror, it's not scalable to select juror by a centralized entity, and we will also introduce a single point of failure, because now if you manage to get access to the address selecting the juror, you could just select a same fake juror thousands of times, and you will get control of the system. So if we are able to select the juror, we will actually be operating it because we will be selecting who can participate. Instead of selecting juror, we put in place economic incentive, so that if you don't know anything about the topic and want to be a juror, you have the right to do it, but you're probably gonna be increment quite often, and it's not gonna be into your economic incentive to do so. So instead of verifying who can do what, it's putting incentive to have only people doing honest action. It's a bit the same as Bitcoin. Like you don't select a validator when in Bitcoin you don't have an entity selecting validator in Bitcoin. But if some miners start to mine a transaction which like stop mining transaction, for example, they won't get paid the transaction fee, or if they try to mine from the past, they won't be the longest chain, so they will spend their energy for nothing. So they will be financially penalized. So the idea, instead of vetting people, is putting incentive in place so that dishonest people can come, but that's going to be costful to them.
Maybe one last question. Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to complement, I think, close a little bit on this discussion, because I think that because the way you've approached the question, the first, you stress test the model and apply it only to the most philosophically challenging cases, right? And so, yes, so is Kleros a good platform to decide on the death penalty for someone who did a horrible crime? Yeah, probably not. But I think that little by little, what they are experimenting with are systems that allow simpler decisions to be made without human intervention, so that, again, just a lot of things can happen more in a more automated way, making sure that human attention is needed only for the most complex cases. And let me take an example, right? So the European, at the initiative of the European Commission, the INATBA has been formed. So it's a large organization that has a number of missions, and that organization is going to appoint a number of board members and probably then commissions who will be tasked with specific mandates. Like some commission will be tasked with creating standards for blockchain, and another one will be tasked with prioritizing projects that can be funded by the European Commission, for example. And I think that what we learned from this experience is that in a decentralized organization, it is important to have distributed governance, and it is important to allow anyone to challenge what management or what appointed members are doing. But I think what we learned from this experience is that allowing anyone to challenge the appointed members does not work unless you ask those challengers to stake an amount so that they are unable to clog the system. And so what I find interesting is more this system of stakes and economics that make relatively small right now organizations work without giving the ability for anyone to clog the system, recognizing that important and moral issues or cultural issues are not yet ready to be dealt with by this kind of automated system. Is that fair?
Yeah, or cultural or moral issue can be dealt in having separate system.
Mm-hmm.
So you opt into the system is aligning to your value. And on also what can be at stake in dispute, we have to keep in mind that smart contract can only have control of asset that they have been explicitly given control of. So in the first example, with Alice paying Bob for the website, only Alice put some money. So if Bob does not do the website, Bob cannot be liable to damages for not doing the website. You could make another contract where Bob can say that if I fail to do it within time, I can pay damages in addition of not getting paid. You could make this kind of contract. But then when people contract with each other, they clearly know from the beginning what they can lose at most where a dispute will arise, and they cannot have, the other assets are not part of the contract and cannot be taken due to this contract.
Yeah. So I think that you're entirely right, but I think even the concept of saying if we agree to disagree, we will live apart raises some moral issues, right? So for example, then you enter a system whereby you have blue states and red states, and in blue states you have a right to abortion, and in red states you don't have. So I think all those issues, when you take it to a certain level, become really hard to solve, and we're just progressing little by little. I mean, there is no optimal solution for any of those issues.
But abortion is not something you can draw parallel with because you don't enter into a contract. With abortion, it's only you and yourself, and you have no deposit, so like you cannot penalize someone for abortion using Kleros. That's unless you ask people to put a deposit stating that they will never get an abortion, and if they get one, then they can lose their deposit for lying. But that's something really convoluted to get to this point. So when there is no contract between people, you won't use Kleros. Kleros is only when you have contract between people and that they opt in with full knowledge of the maximum amount of what they could lose. And I think we should not draw parallel with punishing like general crime, which are not between contracting parties.
Okay, we'll take it offline. You had a question maybe first? Okay, I think, sir, you were first, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I understand that from a rational point of view, it does make sense, but people are not rational. And if you incentivize with money without having identity, you just give power to people with a lot of wealth to enforce anything they want.
So the thing about the wealth is if you have like multiple million, you're probably not gonna stake multiple million to solve a small claim dispute all your day.
No, true. So could you just solve the small disputes with AI on a cheaper way?
Some dispute could be solved. You could have some system where you solve the dispute with AI first, and some kind of appeal where you appeal to human in the second step. Also about solving with AI disputes, it's specifically complex because you have adversarial machine learning where you can specifically give some example to fool the AI. So like it ranges from some stuff they put on a cat to make it look like guacamole by an image recognition software, to being able to change the perception of what is a road to self-driving car. So in this case, that's slightly more preoccupating because you could just make the car crash. So for now, I would say that AI is not advanced enough to be able to deal with dispute, because in dispute you can specifically put data which are going to fool the AI, and that's why AI is not sufficient now. Or if at some point you use AI most of the time, you still need to be able to have human input, at least at a second level in appeals.
I am a lawyer and an ethics expert in many H2020 projects. Regarding this, I would like to know if you have considered to embed ethical aligned design inside the solution. I know that there are many initiatives of standardization where ethical design is something that is inserted inside the solution. For instance, there are many AE programs that embed inside themselves algorithm ethical aligned. Have you considered this for this kind of solution?
So on the ethic point, it's still it's in infancy because it's about policies of additional recommendation on how to rule cases. And for now, the part of ethics is to rule against people who will do stuff like murder, lying, and stuff like that. So it's still really, really basic. But you could imagine people to add other policies to add extra level of ethics in court decision. So you can ask to add a policy and it can be voted on, which give extra information on how to...
I was referring to ethical aligned algorithms, putting inside the solution.
But like Kleros is not really that much an algorithmic solution. Of course, like you draw people and you have some economic where with token and arbitration fee distributed to the participant. But Kleros is not an algorithmic dispute resolution system. It's not some AI. It's you have real human who solve the problem. So I don't really get the point about ethical algorithm design for that.
Because it is a solution which is widespread, for instance, in the industry 4.0, and it can be transposed in similar contexts.
So I don't really see that much what ethical algorithm design is, and if you want, we can continue this conversation after, and you can explain me more what ethical algorithm design is.
The question was if you consider to address from a technical point of view the embedding ethical design inside the solution. This was the question.
So not really from the technical point of view, but just from the point of view of policies to be sure to give ethical rulings. Because it's not something obvious for blockchain organizations that they have to give ethical ruling. You can see, for example, if you can compare with Augur, which is a prediction market, where their way to solve dispute is mostly to stick to the letter of the question and not really look at intent. And if people lose some money, that's fine as long as they clearly answer to the question as it is worded. Why I would say that Clojure have more of an ethical approach where they also look at what is fair and what people meant when they enter into a contract, but not really from a code perspective.
All right. I think that this is a good time to move on to the lunchtime. Thank you very much, Clément, for answering these questions.
Thank you.